Chapter 4, the spread of Islam. So section 4.1 is all about Islamic early expansion. So taking Islam and expanding it into really 3 different continents. So the essential question is, what were the main factors that led to the spread of Islam? So what actually caused the spread of Islam? And then the blending of cultures. The blending of cultures literally means many different cultures coming together in one place and blending together. The Muslim Empire, Abu Bakr becomes the first caliph. The caliph is a title that the Muslims use for their highest leader. So there are no kings, there are no emperors, there are no presidents. The caliph is the name of their highest leader. And a caliph literally means successor. By 634, Abu Bakr made Arabia into a unified state. So he took all the different little country states and put them together into one large country, making Arabia. He conquered many of the surrounding lands. We're going to take a look at a map in a few minutes that'll show you exactly how far Arabia spread. And they also practiced religious tolerance or acceptance. So it was very smart of them to actually practice religious tolerance if they were planning on taking over other countries and inviting those people to become citizens of Arabia, and then also trading with other countries. Religious tolerance was very important because you wouldn't want to offend the people that you're trying to work with. Many caliphs came from the Umayyad family, and they moved the capital to Damascus. Damascus is on the original Arabian map we made in 3.1, and we're also going to see it on the map in just a minute, and you'll be able to see why Damascus was a great spot for the new capital. They conquered much of Central Asia, as well as northern India and parts of North Africa, which we'll see on the map in just a moment. Nope, too fast. They also, because of the way that they were starting to spread, they were also able to control trade in the Eastern Mediterranean. So we're going to take a look at how they were expanding. And as they were expanding, their trade was also expanding. And they were able to control a lot of different water inlets into the land. The Berbers, this is a tribe from North Africa, converted to Islam. And the Arabs and Berbers, their armies actually conquered Spain. So they conquered the southern part of Spain, and they were able to keep control of that for 700 years, which is actually quite long at this time period to be able to rule a specific area for such a long period of time, with so many different tribes actually conquering each other and invading each other. To be able to rule the land for 700 years is actually a great accomplishment. In 749, the new Islamic dynasty of the Abbasids started. Trade helped spread Islam, which we're going to see that in just a moment. There is a map that really shows all the different trade routes that really shows you how far Islam spread. And remember, the farther it spreads, it's spreading into other cultures, other countries. So being able to also not just spread culture, but spread religion as well. So trade brought new products to the Muslim lands. So products, as we look at the map, we're going to see there's obviously different regions that they are going to be trading with. So they're a desert land, but they're also going to be trading with China. They're going to be trading with Africa. So these countries and these continents have much different materials and products than they do. So they're going to be able to really expand their trade this way. Some of the things that they traded with, specifically with China, were how to make paper and the use of gunpowder, which obviously, as you need to protect your country, protect your lands, the use of gunpowder becomes much more valuable than most other products. All right, let's take a look at our map. So our map shows you Damascus here in the middle. It's a really good area for a new a new capital. The reason being is because we have all of this water inlet here. So we're actually controlling the Mediterranean Sea by controlling Spain right here, because it's the Mediterranean Sea. So we're able to control the inlet of the Mediterranean Sea as well as the surrounding areas around the Arabian Peninsula. So we have control over all these inlets here. Look how far we travel into Asia, around India, and down into Africa and into Europe. So we're actually traveling on these trade routes into several different continents and countries. This is how we are able to not just get new products and new materials from all these different places, but we're also helping blend and spread different cultures and religions. We're going to come back to this map in a few minutes. The spread of Islam is really about the blend of cultures. As you saw in the map, many different countries are all being connected by these trade routes. Everything that you see in this orange color is Arabia. So this is all of the Muslim lands. The Muslim lands spread quite far. So even though Arabia is actually the name of this piece of land, the culture of Arabia and the Muslim culture and the Islam religion spread this far. Okay, in 762, Baghdad became the new capital of the Islamic Empire. Now, Baghdad is actually in, I don't know if I would say it's in a more convenient place. You can see it's surrounded here by land. Damascus is surrounded on 3 sides with land and 1 side with water, which actually protects it from one side because it's much harder to invade somebody by water than it is by land because it's a much slower process and you can see the people coming. The land, you could actually see how hilly it is here because the desert has a lot of different hills and valleys in it. Baghdad was surrounded on one side with hills but flat on the other side, but it didn't have that protection of water on one side. So it actually made it a little more vulnerable to invasion. However, being more inland did give it some more, kind of more of a centralized location for a lot of the trade routes. So Baghdad becomes our new capital. And then Cordoba, which is in Spain, became the largest and most advanced city in the Western Europe. So Cordoba is over here in Spain. One of the reasons is going to be very obvious is it's at the inlet of the Mediterranean Sea. So being a huge trade, basically a trade area, it's able to control all of the inlet that people are trading by boat coming in here and also going over the land bridge into Africa. It's not a land bridge, it's a little strait, but it's not very far. So being able to control the traffic going through there, Spain actually becomes very, very wealthy. So Cordoba becomes one of the wealthiest cities. We're going to watch the Khan Academy video. The reason we're going to watch it online together through this video is because a lot of people are having a hard time viewing the YouTube videos at home on their own, especially if you're on a district Chromebook. So we're going to view it as part of the lecture. That way everyone has access to it. It is an 8-minute video, so it is a little bit long, but I want you to really focus on, you can kind of see what it's going to talk about. It's very similar to the trade route video, the trade route picture that we just saw a couple slides ago. So really focus on the idea of the spread of the Islamic culture as you take notes onto your Cornell notes from this video.
Where are we and when are we right now?
So we are around the early 7th century,
Okay.
And here we see the Byzantine Empire, which at the time was still a continuation of Rome. So this is like the Eastern Roman Empire, and it's an aging empire. And we also have Sassanid Persia, which started in the 3rd century and is still continuing into this period.
Right, so we've got on the timeline, it's going beyond our start point here.
Yep, so these are 2 very powerful empires who often are in tension with one another. As you can see, they neighbor each other. And around this time, they're involved in some pretty powerful struggles here.
Right, so in 628, it leads to a lot of instability within Sassanid Persia.
Certainly, and in some ways as well, the Byzantines are weakened by how many resources they've exhausted in these tensions. So around this time, a new religion emerges. Muhammad is born in Arabia, and pretty soon, during his lifetime and immediately after his lifetime, the religion of Islam spreads rapidly through Islamic conquest, which Sal talked about in an earlier video.
I mean, just to give you an impression, Muhammad died in the year 633.
Yes.
So by 750, this is what the state of the Islamic world looked like.
So they took over most of Persia and a large part of the Byzantine Empire, as we can see, and then even beyond. It goes further east, further west, all the way over to Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens really, really quickly. But it's not the case that Islamic culture necessarily takes in all of these areas that quickly. So it takes a little bit longer for that to really take hold. And it also takes hold in areas far beyond this empire as well. So certainly the presence of Islamic or Muslim rulers in these areas certainly did affect the culture of these places. But what's more important is sort of the ways in which Islam slowly integrated with some of these cultures. And that happened through trade, through missionaries, and also through pilgrimage routes that happened, emanating out from Mecca. And these religious ideas weren't static. As they moved through different areas and as they moved through different routes, they changed and they started to take the shape of the local culture and the local flavor as well.
So let me pull up some trade routes. These were the active trade routes of the period. And you can see this is a continuation of the Silk Road. It goes all the way from Rome to China. This is Xi'an, which was then known as Chang'an. This is the imperial capital of at least 10 different Chinese dynasties. There's also a very large mosque here.
So here we have the Great Mosque at Xi'an. And what's really interesting about this mosque is that it really fuses a lot of Islamic and Chinese ideas. So, for example, it still sort of has the structure of an imperial building and in the way that the courtyards are set up.
Sure.
But instead of following sort of the rules of feng shui, it is oriented towards Mecca, which is the direction in which Muslims look when they pray. But it still has a very Chinese character.
Right.
And this makes sense because these trade routes basically had to go through the Islamic Empire. And so as people traveled, so did ideas, and those ideas transformed along the way.
What's next on our whistle-stop tour, Iman?
Let's look at the mosque in Janae.
Okay. So Janae is in what is today Mali. It's just south of Timbuktu, or Tombouctou as it's called today. So it was a great center of Islamic learning. And in Janae is the site of the world's largest mud brick building, the Grand Mosque in Janae. Let me pull it up. It's a really incredible building that gets at a lot of elements of Malian culture. So this is the Grand Mosque of Janae. There's a mud brick building. We have an article about this on Khan Academy, the art history section. What's really cool to me about the Grand Mosque of Janae is the way that it incorporates Malian traditions into Islamic tradition. So you can see on top of these spires, and some of these spires are minarets from which issue the call to prayer. You can't see it in this detail, but there are little ostrich eggs on top of.
Eggs.
Yeah, in Mali, ostrich eggs represent purity and fertility. And so even within the constraints of building a religious building, there's still expressions of local culture.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how that spread through trade, but it also spread another way, which is through pilgrimage, through missionaries, through preachers, and that also took on the local traditions in interesting ways. So let's go to South India, near Kerala.
So this is the Cheraman Juma Mosque. This is supposed to be one of the earliest mosques in history. Its construction dates to about 630.
Yep, 629 to be precise.
Thank you.
This was actually during the life of the Prophet, and it's quite far from Mecca, so it's really fascinating how quickly it traveled there. But it traveled with a preacher, and as you can see, this is a very distinctly Indian mosque. Another way that Islam traveled through preachers was through Sufis. So let's talk about Sufis for just a minute.
Sure.
Sufis were like a mystical devotional practice, and we see many iterations of Sufism in all different sects of Islam. But they were particularly successful at spreading Islam for a few reasons. One of them was that they adapted the teachings to local traditions. And another reason was that they built lodges and places of worship along the way. And these sometimes function like community centers and monasteries. So let's have a look at a couple of them.
Sure.
Let's look at some North African ones.
So this is a ribat in Tunisia.
Yes, so a ribat is kind of like a hostel. You have travelers staying there. Early on in their history, there were soldiers that stayed there. Over time, they sort of took on a sort of a monastery culture for Sufis. We also have something called a zawiya. So here's an example of one. And similarly, this was a place of learning. It was a place of worship. People often lived there for a long time. So they sort of have this like monastic tradition that created a permanent presence for Islam along these routes. And this was really, really integral in the spread of Islam. And it's not just in North Africa, but even farther east, you see different iterations of that. So once you get into former Persian territory and in Indian territory, you have something called a khanqah. So here's an example from Kashmir. This is called the Shah Hamdan Mosque, and it's 14th century mosque. And this is a commemorative building. It commemorates an important Sufi leader. But again, you see some of the local flavor here. You see that there's some intricate wood carvings, which is really
very Kashmiri.
Very Kashmiri, certainly. And similarly, this was a place of worship, but also a place where people passed through and interacted and learned. So it was a site of spreading Islamic tradition as well.
So that was about, I should have said, that was about here in Srinagar.
Yes, about there.
Yeah, and so in this way, Islam was also spread.
Certainly. So if you zoom out a bit, let's have a look at sort of the bounds of the Islamic Empire.
Sure.
And where we see some of these instances of new Islamic traditions, we're no longer in the heart of the Islamic Empire. We're beyond that. And that's because Islam was carried in many different ways. And as we can see, it ended up with some really, really diverse iterations of Islam.
Okay, so hopefully you can go back and watch that as many times as you want, but hopefully that came through clear enough for those who were not able to watch the YouTube video through the link. So at this point, that's all 4.1. 4.1 is fairly short. It's page 80 to 85 in your textbook, so you can expand on your notes after you read that section. This is the one part that people are forgetting to do. Please, please, please go back, read section 4.1 and add to your notes. I cannot put the entire textbook all on one Google slide doc. So there are some things in there that you should be taking notes on. You could add your own thoughts and ideas, even comments, so you could add notations to your page. You're going to underline vocabulary words and keywords, as well as highlight main ideas. Create questions for each section and write them in the questioning column. So a great question would be, how did Islam spread? Right? So that was one of the sections, is how did Islam spread? Another one would be who were the leaders of the Muslim empires would be another really good one. So how did trade routes help spread Islam? All of those are great questions for the questioning column of your notes. And then make sure that you're answering your essential question in your summary. So the last thing you're going to do this week is the Hajj activity at the very end of the Google slide doc. Basically, I have some questions here about the Hajj, which we have covered over the last couple of weeks. So this is just a really good review about the Hajj. So you're going to answer the questions in the text boxes to the right, and then you're going to drag the word Mecca onto the map where Mecca should be, because Mecca is the holiest of cities for Islam, and you need to make sure you know where Mecca is. So very simple, straightforward. You just want to make sure you read the directions very carefully. You fill in the boxes with the answers, and then you drag Mecca over to where it's supposed to be. So if you have any questions at all, you are more than welcome to reach out to me, ask me on Zoom, log into my office hours, email me, text me on Remind, add a comment to this assignment. There are so many different ways to get a hold of me to ask for help if you need it. So I hope everybody understands a little bit more about the early expansion of the Islam empires.